Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 5 stories, roughly 2 hours worth as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 500 likes on this one. Only drop a like if you feel this video is genuinely deserving of it. If you are new here, I post content just like this all of the time, so subscribing is of course very much appreciated as well. I want to do something a little bit fun for this video. I would love to hear all of your favorite horror movie recommendations. We're coming up on October, so I'm looking for more movies to watch, and also maybe whoever is watching this video can scroll down to the comments and get some good recommendations as well. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. When I first met the pale man, he wore a suit of deepest black. There wasn't a speck on it, not even a fleck of dirt from the muddy road he must have walked to reach my father's pub. He stood out from the regular clientele, who struggled to go an evening without smearing gravy-stained fingers on their trousers or slopping beer down their shirts. As I watched him effortlessly navigate his way through the packed room, and take a seat at the single empty table, my heart clenched. I'd kill for a suit like that, I thought. A suit that fit me perfectly. A suit made by a tailor instead of my mother cannibalizing the clothes my brother had long since outgrown. A suit that would make people pay attention when I walked into the room. As if I had spoken the words aloud, he locked eyes with me and smiled. Later he would tell me that I might as well have whispered my desperation into his ear. He hadn't read my mind. Not exactly. I could smell it from across the room, he said. The reek of your hunger. But that secret wouldn't be revealed to me for many years. During the first few minutes of our acquaintance, I was thrilled by his sudden, unexpected attention. When he beckoned me to his table, I all but tripped over my own feet in my haste to reach him. Up close, he was breathtaking. Auburn hair fell in heavy curls onto his shoulders, and his pale skin was almost pearlescent. His eyes, nearly as dark as his suit, seemed to laugh. As I took the only other seat at the table, his smile grew wider. Through his parted lips, I saw that his teeth were stained black. It was not the usual decay that afflicted some of our neighbors. It looked as though he had tried to take a bite out of the night itself. I glanced away quickly, gripped by a sudden, instinctive fear, like a rabbit sighting amber fox eyes through the long grass. When I looked back again, I saw his teeth were straight and white. Relieved, eager, I dismissed it as a trick of the shadows. You like this? He motioned towards his suit. I nodded, and he asked, Would you like one of your own? The laughter bubbled out of me before I could stop it. It matters little what I want. I've as much chance of affording one as a cat's in hell without claws. He tutted lightly. A rather constrained attitude. In life, half the bottle is deciding what you want. So tell me, Peter. He propped his delicately pointed chin atop his laced fingers. What do you want? Had I paused to question how he knew my name, I would have rationalized that he had heard one of our patrons summoning me back to the bar, demanding a fresh pint of beer, but I didn't question. The pale man was too fantastical a sight. Too rich for our humble village. Too important to talk with the likes of me. I feared that, should I allow my attention to wander, he would evaporate before my eyes. So I answered his question. Of course I wanted the suit. More than that, I wanted one for every day of the week. Every confession after that first one came easier. Most people born into our village lived their entire unremarkable lives there. They were christened, married, and laid to rest within the small boundaries of the same church and its yard. The thought of following that fate made me feel like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to escape, to travel dusty roads and churning seas, to see anywhere other than here. And I wanted to do it comfortably, luxuriously even. My entire life I had watched my parents hoard each coin. Usually it stretched just far enough, but in leaner times they agonized over how it should be spent. One winter my mother skipped so many meals that she scarcely had the energy to rise out of bed. I wanted respect, and my own small stock of fame, a name associated with something other than pouring drinks in a dingy pub. Mostly, I wanted to be seen. All of this burst out of me in a rush. I didn't care that I might be overheard, and if my father caught wind of it, he would try to knock such notions out of my head with a sharp clap around the ear. Only two things seemed important: bearing my soul to the pale man, and keeping my eyes on the table while I did it. At the corner of my vision I could see his smile growing wider and wider, and a voice in my head I refused to acknowledge even as I obeyed it warned me that I should look. I would see those black fangs again. When at last I fell silent, the pale man said, "Excellent, Peter. See, you're already halfway there. You know what you want. Now you must decide what you're willing to do to get it." For that, I had no response. Dreams were well and good, but I lived in reality. For a young man of humble origins, the best hope was to strike out for the nearest town and try to forge a life there. But there would be no suits in that future. No ships nor accolades. Perhaps not even anything resembling comfort. The pale man leaned in close, whispering conspiratorially into my ear. "What if I told you I could give all that to you? A long life filled with anything you could desire, and not in some dim, distant future, but right now. You could walk out the door and step into a new life." I should have laughed, or accused him of mocking me. Instead, I had an image of a serpent and an apple, and what our rector might say if he could hear this conversation. Goose pimples erupted across the nape of my neck, as though someone had blown cold breath there. Deep laughter rumbled in his chest. "You give me entirely too much credit. I'm not him. I'm merely a talented individual in a position to offer you an excellent deal." I risked a glance at him. His teeth were thankfully still white, but his eyes had grown sharp, hungry. I wondered whether that expression was mirrored on my own face. And what would my end be? "Once a year, you will need to complete an errand for me." He waved an airy hand. "Nothing outside of your capabilities, of course, and you will be able to discharge your duties in a single day. The other 364 days belong to you entirely." In my entire life, I hadn't owned a single day. They belonged to my parents, my brother, and as soon as I was as tall as the tables, the pub's patrons. Sacrificing one day a year seemed like an excellent bargain, the pale man supplied. "I quite agree. If you wish to accept, we need only drink on it, no wait." He plunged a hand into one of his pristine pockets and withdrew a fat, gleaming apple and a silver paring knife. Dropping me an exaggerated wink, he said, "We all must have our little jokes, Peter." When he sliced into the apple, I had a sudden suspicion that the flesh inside would be rotten and worm-riddled, but it was as crisp and juicy an apple as I had ever seen, the aroma strong enough to make my mouth water. He cut off 2 slices and held one out to me across the table. As I reached for it, he pulled it just out of my grasp. "One more thing. You cannot exit our deal prematurely. We're entering a contract, of sorts, and it must run for its full term. Is that acceptable to you?" Last chance. The same instinct that had urged me not to look at his teeth now cautioned me again. Pouring pints is better than sticking your neck in a snare. Get up. Walk away. Instead, I plucked the slice from his hand and crammed it into my mouth. The apple was cloyingly sweet. Unaccustomed to such richness, I feared my body would reject it, and for a moment I was seized with panic at what the pale man might do should I splash his fine suit with vomit. Grinning across the table, the pale man had no such trouble. He ate his own slice in one bite. "Go then, Peter," he said once he had swallowed, motioning towards the door. "Enjoy your new life." Standing up so quickly my chair clattered to the floor, I strode to the door and yanked it open. Just before I stepped over the threshold, a voice whispered in my mind, "See you in a year." As I set out down the road, with nothing more than my clothes on my back, I had no doubts. A single, irresistible urge dominated me. Head south. After a mile of following my new compass, I found a young woman stranded by the roadside. She gratefully accepted my offer to escort her to the next village, some 3 miles further. The walk gave us some time to get acquainted. I learned that she was wealthy and well-connected. She learned that I was charming and funny, although that was as much a discovery for me as it was for her. The next week in the city, I was fitted for my first suit, a gift from the grateful young woman. The next month, we were married with the blessings of her parents, who were surprisingly willing to allow their daughter to marry a poor man of no name. As a wedding present, they funded a 6-month tour of the continent. We wondered at ancient ruins and paintings so exquisite, they near moved me to tears, slept in sheets softer than anything I could have imagined, and dined with the wealthy friends of her wealthy parents. They also had friends at home, as I discovered when we returned. Everyone was so eager to help me find a path in life, something on which I could build my name. By the end of that first year, I had a devoted, newly pregnant wife, a grand home in the city, and I was in the exciting, early stages of building my reputation. I had all but convinced myself I had imagined the pale man, dreamed him up as a way of explaining my incredible good fortune. But precisely 1 year after our first meeting, I woke suddenly in our warm marriage bed with the certainty that I was being watched. Unwillingly, I rose and went to the window. Each step of that short journey cost me more than the last. Every instinct I possessed urged me to turn to bed and hide deep beneath the covers. But the very thought sent the cloying taste of apples clawing up my throat. When I cracked the curtains, I saw the pale man standing with his hand on our gate, wearing his familiar smile. I wish I could tell you what the first errand was. It appalls me that I can't, but you must understand. I spend the rest of the year trying to forget the one day that belongs to him, and those days he does own have blurred together over time. Sometimes the task is simple, like delivering a message. A letter will appear on my doorstep addressed in thick, clotted blood, and I must deliver it to the addressee. The first time I acted as courier, I handed the letter over personally. Since then, I have deposited them on doorsteps and beaten a quick retreat. The cold terror in that first recipient's eyes, the tremble in her hand as she accepted the letter, still gives me nightmares that leave me trembling. I have stolen objects of great value and hidden them in the rooms of innocent men and women before anonymously notifying the police. I have forged documents and watched the ensuing chaos unfold in the drawing rooms of the wealthy and powerful, my heart hammering in my chest, convinced that at any moment, someone will point their finger in my direction and denounce me as the perpetrator. Some of the worst assignments have put me into contact with twisted beings, human yet more alike in nature to the pale man. I assisted a silent, hulking man with burying the remnants of what had once been a person. Although our work began at midnight and was completed before dawn, it seemed to take a small eternity. I could barely force my rigid limbs into action. So frozen were they, with the certainty he would take his spade and hack me into chunks as small as the ones we were trying to bury. On another occasion, I led an excitable, ferret-looking creature to 3 different houses. The next day, I read in the newspaper that they had each been set ablaze in the night. Someone had barred the doors. There were no survivors. I took to my bed and didn't rise for 3 days, driving my wife to tears in her worry for me. Comforting her was beyond my capacity, no matter how much I wished to. I couldn't stop thinking of thick, black smoke filling my lungs while I listened to my family scream for help that would never come. By the end of the 3rd day, I could all but feel the heat cracking my skin. On the 25th anniversary of our deal, the pale man appeared at my dining room table, having conjured a feast seemingly out of thin air. For course after sumptuous course, he spoke of my exploits and achievements over the years, making comments and assessments, expecting me to venture nothing in return. The last course was mine alone. He gave a deep bow as he placed it before me, then removed the cloche with a flourish. Before me lay a steaming heart. It's human. That was my one thought before he handed me a knife and fork, and I had to shut out all reason. The only thing that terrified me more than the grisly task before me was the thought of refusing the pale man. I could see the gleeful dare in his eyes as he waited for me to take the silverware. Try it, they seemed to say. See what happens. 2 hours it took me. 2 hours of sawing through the thick muscle, chewing, choking back my gorge. By the time I forced down the last morsel, I was weeping. He handed me a chunk of bread to sop up the pool of blood from the plate. As he buttoned his coat and made to leave, I asked why. It was the sole question I had dared ask since we sat at the small table in my father's pub, and only the utter senselessness of the act could penetrate my dreadful awe of him long enough to force me to speak. With his other tasks, I could rationalize that there was probably some purpose, even if I didn't understand it. But this was just cruel. He smiled slowly, and for the first time since that day, I saw the black seeping into his teeth. I've told you before, Peter, we all must have our little jokes. The worst of it, though, was when he required nothing more of me than to listen. 5 times he has appeared, precisely at midnight at the foot of my bed. These are the only occasions during which he has offered me real honesty, including a glimpse of his true form. His teeth were black, yes, but that inky darkness extended over the rest of his body, pulsing through the veins beneath his near-translucent skin and extending around him like a cloak, and the stench emanating from him, as rotten as I suspected the apple he once offered me would be. Each time he pulled a chair up to my bed and began to talk. He told me of deals he had made with other unfortunate souls, deals that were not so generous as the one he offered me. He told me of their gruesome ends, usually long after they had been driven out of their wits. He told me of where their souls were languishing now. I knew you were better than that, Peter. He said it each time, softly, almost affectionately. I could smell it from across the room, the reek of your hunger, your potential. He spoke of his own past in a time when men and gods walked closely together, and the person he had been before he became the Pale Man. Out of everything, through all the years, this has come closest to driving me to madness, for I fear it is a glimpse into my own future. It has become my daily practice to examine myself in the mirror, each morning with my chest so heavy with hope and dread that I can scarcely breathe. I pray for a gray line or a wrinkle before steeling myself to look into the glass. You see, I first met the Pale Man in 1812, yet I look no older than the day I left my father's pub. No one, not my family, nor the esteemed colleagues of my many ventures, has questioned my seemingly eternal youth. Part of the Pale Man's sorcery, I presume, to ensure the continuation of our bargain. In my long years, while I remained ageless, I watched first my wife go into the ground, then our children, then their children, until finally I could bear it no longer and cut myself adrift from them. The Pale Man spoke truly when he said I could not exit the contract prematurely. I first tried on the night I left my family. I have tried many times since by rope, by knife, and by poison, and always I awake, unharmed, at least in body, in my bed. Recently I have noticed a change, not the signs of aging that I have awaited for many decades, but something else, a certain blackening around the edges of my teeth. When it first began, I only saw it for a second or two. I would blink, and when I next looked into the mirror, they would be pristine and white again. But the closer I get to the Pale Man's next visit, the longer the blackness lasts during my daily inspections. During the daylight hours, I can fool myself into thinking it is a trick of the shadows. When I lie abed, slicked with sweat, even though my skin is ice cold, the comforting lies fall away, and I am left with what I fear is the stark truth. There is something more. I've begun to smell it, the hunger he spoke of, hunger for wealth and power, for security and belonging, for an ounce of comfort. I smell it everywhere I go, dining at a restaurant, being fitted for a new suit at my tailor's, through a computer screen. When I catch a particularly strong scent, it takes every ounce of my will not to follow it, to trace it to its source and see what they might do to sate their hunger. I have managed to resist the urge so far, but every time the blackness creeps a little further into my mouth, it gets harder. A little voice, I'm unsure whether it's the Pale Man or my own instinct, whispers that taking their hunger and making it my own might be the only thing to make this existence tolerable. So I'm writing this now, while there is still enough of me left to want to warn you. If you are approached by a man with an irresistible offer, think twice before accepting it. It might be the Pale Man, or it might be a man once known as Peter. The house was beautiful. It was like a dream. 2 stories, 2 bathrooms, 2 beds. The living room dropped down like in the 70s, and the kitchen was complete with an island and a beautiful view of the garden and a large, towering apple tree. There was even some decor left by the previous residents. Little bird feeders, a stone Buddha by the front step, a tree of life tapestry hanging in the living room. The realtor had told my parents the previous resident wouldn't be needing these things back, but she would remove them before we moved in. But my parents told her not to. It made the space feel cozy and lived in. We moved in at the beginning of summer, so I don't have to worry about school for a while. It was nice to have no additional stress, but it made me sad to have those months free without much opportunity to see my friends. I found myself worrying about what they were doing, if they were having more fun without me, if they'd already forgotten I existed. It didn't take long for me to realize moving was lonely. I spent my summer in the garden pretending I was a forlorn maiden, cast away from everything she knows. I lay in the cool dirt beneath the apple tree, watching the leaves flutter in the warm breeze. Sometimes I would even eat an apple, but they were always a bit too bitter for my taste. I would wonder about the silver in the wood, like someone had hacked at it with an axe, then gave up. Who would try and chop down such a beautiful thing? The apple tree became a sort of sanctuary. The shade protected me from the blazing sun on the hotter days, and the trunk became an incredibly comfortable backrest to lean back on and read. One day, while I was doing just that, something blew up against my leg. A dirty, stained piece of paper. I set my book down and picked it up, curious. I scanned it quickly. It looked like a letter, from what I could make out, but it cut off at the end, and there was no backside. I shifted from my spot against the tree, digging my fingers into the soft dirt and searching around. I thought that if this letter had been here, maybe, just maybe, the rest were too. I was desperate for excitement at that point, and I wasn't beyond getting my hands dirty to find some. Sure enough, soon my fingers were prying at dampened notebook paper, carefully edging it out of the soil. I think I found most of them just searching in the dirt. They weren't buried very deep. As soon as I finished reading those letters, I went to find my parents, heaving. We left that house, and we never came back. I'll do my best to relay to you what the letters said. At least, what I could read of it. Dear Sylvia, I miss you the worst in summer. The winter here is cold and unforgiving, but the summer is worse. I cannot even bring myself to leave the house anymore. I fear some days that death follows me, like a stray dog nipping at my heel. Now that you and Elsie are gone from my life, I have nothing left to run from. How could I be meant to stay here when you were not? Even so, I feel very strongly that dying now would be a betrayal to you, no matter how much I would love to join you, wherever you are. My days are lonely and plain now. I eat nothing but what I can take from the garden. Thank you for my nourishment and my survival, my dear wife. There isn't much flavor to my food without the smell of you cooking it in the kitchen. I think often of my time as a butcher. I used to be happy with that kind of work, but now it only disgusts me. The thought of slicing through meat that was once a living creature, nearly brings me to tears. Some nights when I close my eyes, all I can see is muscles twitching. It haunts me in your absence. I swear, Sylvia, I will never consume that stuff again. The apple tree is the only piece of you I have left, the only living piece. I could go catatonic for hours just watching it sway. When I see that tree, I feel that you are nearby. I miss you. R. Dear Sylvia, yesterday I went to sit under our tree. It pains me that when you were alive, I didn't spend much time in our garden. Perhaps I had old hermit in my blood. Even then, I preferred to watch you from the kitchen, admiring your gardening prowess from a distance. Perhaps that makes me a bad husband, but I think you liked that about me. How I always gave you enough space. It's nice out here. Very peaceful. The fresh air feels like you touching me. I could have sworn I could hear Elsie's laughter in the breeze. I noticed something strange. As I sat against the trunk, enjoying the sunshine on my skin, it felt like the tree moved against my back, almost as if it were squirming. Perhaps my mind is not what it used to be, but perhaps it was you. If it was you, thank you. I hope you'll reach out again. That night I had a very hard time falling asleep. No matter what I did, I could not feel comfortable. My bed felt wrong, felt lumpy and strange, as if it were not made for me. I gave up and went to our kitchen, and I watched the tree through the window until my eyes grew heavy. It was so beautiful in the moonlight, glowing gently, drawing the eye. It was so quiet, so dignified. It made me feel uneasy, but in a comforting way, as odd as that may sound. When I got back to bed, it didn't feel wrong anymore, and I was finally able to rest. R. Dear Sylvia, these days all I find myself doing is wandering the house, reminiscing. I don't dare move or change anything. I want to preserve everything just the way you left it. Our house is covered in little trinkets, hippie things that I don't entirely understand. You always had such an earthly style. Some of it I don't care for. It simply isn't my cup of tea, but I never would have told you that. I would never want to step on your toes. It's apple season again. I remember watching you and Elsie climb our tree, shrieking and laughing uproariously as you hung from the branches like monkeys. Elsie. My little monkey. I know she never cared for that nickname when I called her it, but it stuck. You were such a good mother, Sylvia. I hope you knew I knew that. I used to love apple season. I loved watching you pick them, dropping the ripe ones into wicker baskets in the grass, and a couple of days later, the entire house would smell of pie, sweet cinnamon and sugar, and it would linger for days, even all the way up in the attic. This is something I miss dearly. Please come back, Sylvia, and bake one last apple pie. R. Dear Sylvia, today I went out to pick apples. I thought maybe I could take a crack at your old apple pie recipe, perhaps treat myself to something besides wilted vegetables. However, something very strange and disturbing happened to me. I was collecting the ones that looked the ripest. I am not the most well-versed in things like this, but I can make an educated guess. I found one that looked so perfect. It was red and shiny, not a scratch on it or a single wormhole, which felt lucky. I went to take a bite, and what I found caused me to vomit into the grass. Inside of the apple was meat, raw meat. It was not quite the kind of meat I used to butcher, although it twitched as such. I could see white muscles and tendon. It oozed with pink plasma where my teeth had parted the skin. It tasted metallic and rotten on my tongue. The flavor still hasn't passed. I cut open every single apple I had picked. The trees seemed to shudder. They were all like that, made of meat. Some entirely, and some as if a rot was spreading over them. I can't help but wonder how long it has been this way. I feel unnerved. I feel that I can't trust my brain, my vision, or my taste buds. I feel I may vomit again. I do not know if what I experienced is real, but if it was, I do not know what to do. It is unholy what I have experienced. Tonight I will pray. R. Dear Sylvia, today someone knocked on the door. I was still feeling shaken up and disoriented, so this caused my nerves to be completely shot. I do not enjoy interacting with strangers, or anyone for that matter. It was a man, and he was carrying a box. He asked me for you, and for Elsie. I told this man that you had not lived here for a while. He seemed confused, so I clarified that I was your husband and Elsie was my daughter. and you had both passed away in a tragic accident. That caused him to look even more confused. Forgive me, but I felt defensive and uncomfortable. I figured maybe this man looked so confused because I am old and you were younger. Oh, how I wish I could rid this planet of all judgment. This man seemed as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He left then. He did not give me the box, which I assume was meant for you. Perhaps he was a coworker of yours, or an old friend, or maybe even just a mailman. I feel sorry that he had to hear the news from me, even despite my disdain. I cried today. I didn't dare go back out to the tree, but I wanted to. I feel as if I may be losing my mind. That interaction with that man at the door made me feel unnerved. I wish he had not come. I only wish to be with you again. My bed feels strange and alien. It feels too soft, and I swear something smells rotten. Perhaps an animal has gotten trapped in the walls and died. I cannot sleep. R. Dear Sylvia, the smell of rot has become unbearable. I cannot live this way. When I sleep, what you could barely call sleep, I see you. I dream of that first day I saw you and my daughter climbing that tree in our garden, how I watched from the street. I watched you climb and play and laugh, and you looked so happy, so holy. I saw that underneath this happiness was a lonely woman. I was drawn to you as if to a flame, the only warmth in a cold, barren life. I was drawn to you so quickly, and I knew you were all that was right, and I only wanted you, and I only wanted our daughter. It was you or nothing at all, you or the cold. And even these dreams twist and turn into nightmares, and I'm brought back to the day of your death. How you knew you could leave me before I did, and you looked at me with tears in your beautiful brown eyes. All I pray for is a chance to go back, although I know it isn't possible. I know if I could go back, something would be different. I could save you from yourself and Elsie too. You wouldn't have to die. The smell of rot has become unbearable. I am too afraid to look out the window and see the tree. I am too afraid to see it moving. Something is alive in that tree. I feel it in my bones. It is watching me. I fear it is not just the tree that is alive. R. Dear Sylvia, I have ripped apart our bed. Forgive me, I couldn't bear it. All I have found is more meat. It throbs and stinks. I have been sleeping on top of sopping, rotting flesh. I have destroyed our beautiful home. I have ripped apart the sofas and the carpet, and I have smashed the plates. And all I have found is flesh. Flesh and cracking bone. It is alive. It is all alive and moving. It wishes to swallow me. I am being condemned. I am sorry, Sylvia. I'm sorry Elsie found me in the attic that day. I'm sorry you were so afraid. If only you had known I only had good in my heart and love for you. If only I could sleep above you and listen to you snore once more. If only I could watch you one more time out of your kitchen window in the summer. You with our daughter, so oblivious, glowing with ignorant joy. I could have made you happy in that way and more. I loved you, Sylvia, and you loved me. I remember how we fought a few days after I told you you couldn't leave until we worked everything out. How you called me sick. If I am the one who is sick, why am I the one still breathing? It is all made of meat. It sickens me. It makes me want to scream and vomit and bash my head into the wall. It is all wrong. It is all rot. I can't help but feel that you are doing this to me on purpose. Do you want me to join you so badly that you would haunt my every waking hour? I hear sirens now. The blue and red lights flash against the throbbing crimson walls. They twitch with glee at my suffering, at my terror. I will go to the garden with my axe, the last thing you saw with mortal eyes. I will chop down our tree, and I know what I will find inside. I will find meat. I will bury these letters for you in the dirt above your head, and I will chop it down, so that you cannot haunt me any longer. And if they try and stop me, I will take them with me. They will not take my wife and my daughter from me again, nor me away from them. That was the trouble in the first place. I will see you soon, my dear. R. I was 4 when I first saw it. I lived in a fairly safe and comfortable neighborhood. We never wanted for anything, and I was an only child. I had 2 loving parents. By all accounts, there was no real inciting incident, no trauma, no fear, no nothing that would make me hallucinate. I was by all accounts a gifted child who lived with great, loving parents in a large house. I remember I had come home from school. I had gotten a snack from the pantry, and I was taking over the living room to watch Power Rangers, as was my after-school tradition. As I walked into the living room, I looked out into the backyard. At the time, my little brain could only register a furry lump. A squirrel. It hadn't been torn apart or killed by anything, just died of old age. I knew death was a thing, but I had never seen it in real life up to this point. This was the first time it occurred. From the corpse of the squirrel, I saw what looked like stringy tethers break loose from its body. Ethereal blue things, barely thicker than twine, pulling apart as I saw a ghostly, blue version of the squirrel emerge from its body. It regarded me for a moment as I watched it. Could it see me? Did the dead watch us? Then I saw it immediately scamper off. My family wasn't religious. I wasn't religious. We were Christian, sure, but we didn't exactly visit church every Sunday, nor did we avoid specific vices or espout virtues. Still, we believed in the basics. When you die, you go to heaven if you're a good person. Hell if you're a bad person. But at the time, I called it heck. Seeing this, well, I didn't know what to do. How was a 4-year-old supposed to handle this? Instead of watching TV, I went to my mom in the office. She was busy on a computer, having a serious talk with someone I didn't know. Are you sure it's nothing serious? If you... I'll have to call you back. We'll pick this up soon. Sure. Goodbye. She'd hang up the phone, turning her chair to look at me. Yes, Danny? Mom, there's a squirrel in the backyard. I'm sure there is, honey. Is that all you wanted to say? Mom, I think it died. Her face twisted in a look of revulsion. All right, dear. Let me get Daddy to take care of it. She left the office. I could hear her calling, Jacob, Jacob, baby, need you to do something for me. She didn't get it. I mean, how could she? What was there to understand? And I didn't exactly blurt out that I saw ghosts. I was 4. What was I supposed to say? So I hid it. I locked it away in my brain, and it was my little secret. In a way, it gave me catharsis. I wasn't having existential dread at the age of 4, but the unknown still scared me. To know that your soul lives on, well, it gave me some measure of peace even as a child. My parents weren't exactly going to think I was telling the truth either, so why bring it up? Kid me knew grown-ups couldn't see stuff kids could, but it was alright. There was no rule book, but I picked up some things as I watched, some minor rules. Creatures had to be big enough. A mouse seemed to be the cutoff. I didn't see ants or gnats appear. From death, it took about 40 seconds for something to break free. I didn't know what would happen if you were brought back after legal death, but I assumed your soul was dragged back to you. You didn't get to fly, but you could walk through walls like a ghost most of the time. That was about all I had gathered for about a few years. Things were going good for those 2 years. I had my secret nobody else knew, and it gave me peace. I knew one of the great unknowns of humanity. Me, a kid. I felt like a genius. Then the greater truth was revealed. It was December 8th, at about 6:15 in the morning on a Sunday, that things went to hell. I had been dreaming peacefully when the scream woke me up. I bolted upright, almost too afraid to speak. My mom was on the second floor of the house and my parents were down the hallway. If I screamed, I'd wake them up. I had nightmares before. Was that all it was? Just a bad dream and a sudden scream. When you're a child, your mind tricks you to justify things. It couldn't trick my eyes, however. Across the street from us was Jeffrey Raymond's. Mr. Raymond's was an old guy. Not quite senile, but his best years were behind him. He was a kind man. I loved going to his house when we went trick-or-treating. He liked to boast he gave out full-sized candy bars. That made him my favorite neighbor. I got out of my bed to see where the scream had come from, as it had been outside my window and across the street. Was Mr. Raymond's in danger? I didn't know, but I had to look. Mr. Raymond's was entirely blue, just as I had seen other dead things before, but he wasn't acting like himself. He was panicked. He was in his pajamas, howling, screaming, running through walls. He had died, probably from old age, but this wasn't like the squirrels or rabbits I saw. No, he was screeching, sprinting, sometimes going through walls, sometimes hitting them. It's like his body wasn't solid enough. It scared me. I ran down the hall, heavy steps ignoring how early it was. As I'd entered my parents' room, I went to my dad's side of the bed. "Dad?" I'd say. "Dad, wake up. Can you wake up?" He'd groggily groan, leaning over to look at the alarm clock. "Hey, bud, it's really early. You okay? Nightmare?" He'd ask, sitting up from the bed. Mom wouldn't wake up, heavily sleeping. "I think something bad happened to Mr. Raymond's." Why so, buddy? Just a bad feeling?" "Nightmare?" "No, Can you go check on him?" Mr. Raymond's might be sleeping. You know he's an old guy. Dad told me. Dad, please. Can you, please? His eyes said, I'm not going to sleep until I do this, am I? But his face said, anything for you, sport. He'd push himself up, getting his slippers on. All right. I'll go check on him. As Dad went to the stairs, I returned to my room. I'd watch from the second-story window, hearing him open and close the door. Dad waved at a passing jogger, exchanging a quick discussion before he'd walk across the road. All the while, Mr. Raymond's spirit continued to howl, flail, scream. I don't think it knew where it was or what was going on. Dad knocked on the door. Silence. Dad looked concerned for a moment. He knocked again. Silence. Now I think he knew something was wrong. He'd do a quick jog back across to our house, where I heard him in the kitchen grabbing the phone and talking to someone. I hoped to see Mr. Raymond's spirit calm down, but he'd just keep screaming, keep running throughout his rooms and through his walls. There's a danger in nature. When an animal gets wounded, it calls for help. Sometimes a kind human finds it and pulls it out of a trap. Other times, a fellow member of the species finds it and saves it. But most often, those cries attract a predator. And in this case, Mr. Raymond's spirit was a siren. I stayed glued to the window, watching the scene, my eyes switching between the actions of the physical world as an ambulance pulled up and spiritual world, Mr. Raymond's ghost tirelessly howling and scrambling around. I wasn't sure how to help him, so I was going to decide to go to bed. That's when I saw it. All this time, I had only seen blue spirits, human, animal, or otherwise. They'd fluctuate in tone and opacity, sure, but always blue. This was the first time I ever saw a red spirit. It scrambled on all fours, long and lanky. Its arms were too long, its legs not ending in feet but in two sharp talons. One in the front, one in the back. I covered my mouth, watching what I think was its head bob. It had no eyes, a sort of heavy shell covering the top half of its body. It was beelining to the screaming Mr. Raymond. Paramedics were having a polite conversation as it barged through them, phasing like a ghost. One paramedic turned around as if someone had tapped his shoulder, but he looked back to see his friend. I saw a primal terror in Mr. Raymond's eyes. He knew this was a predator. He screamed, howling less like a man and more like an animal, before he'd charge into the house. The thing followed soon after. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. Panicked screams, guttural cries, and then silence. Eerily quiet. Maybe Mr. Raymond's had got away. Maybe he went somewhere further into the afterlife. A child struggled to comprehend non-existence, and the universe was now asking a child to comprehend what came even further after. Nausea was going to overtake me before my dad went in my room, making me turn away from the window. Hey, kiddo. Hey, Mr. Raymond's. Listen, yeah. He seemed unsure of how to broach the subject, doubly so considering I somehow knew Mr. Raymond had died. It's okay, Dad, I whispered. I thought it was a nightmare, but... Bad dreams, I know. Hey, listen, do you want some breakfast? Whatever you want. No, I'm not really hungry right now, but thanks, Dad. I love you lots. I love you too, buddy. Dad closed the door, probably wanting to give me some peace while I processed this. There were things to process, to be sure, but I didn't want to speak on it. I turned back to the window, watching to see if the red thing had gone. It hadn't. The red thing now stood in the middle of the street, hands twitching, hands that ended in knives, not fingers. And it was staring at me. Without eyes. I covered my mouth in horror. Kid logic said that safety from monsters was always under the blanket. That made sense to me, scrambling under it as I got away from the window. Maybe it hadn't noticed. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Did it want to get me next? Did it want to kill me? The blanket covered me, head to my knees as I hid. I didn't need to see it. I could hear it. The clicking and clacking of its knife fingers on the walls. The red glow as it moved inside my room. I was trapped under my blanket quivering, and as it came into my room it just sat there, knees to its chest, right across from me. Time seemed to slow. Did I sit under the blanket for a minute, 20, 2 hours? I don't know, but it wouldn't leave, sitting there watching me. I felt bile well in my throat. I wanted to throw up from panic and dread. Experimentally, and against the child's code of what kept you safe, I removed the blanket. The thing was easily 7 feet tall, maybe more, but its arm length had to be about 8 or more. The shell on its head was more of a carapace. fused to the top of its head like a helmet, leathery red skin, taut and tight, like leather stretched over muscle. The worst was the mouth. It had no lips, no jaws, no normal teeth. What instead I saw was a slowly rotating blender of a hole, sharp and jagged. It was uncanny to feel a stare with no eyes upon you. We locked gazes, or at least I think we did, as I trembled in bed. I think I had peed myself, quivering, watching it observe me. It looked back, seemingly unaware of the horror I was in. We were in a stalemate until one long, bony knife finger uncurled. I watched that knife etch into the wall of my room, not damaging the physical space, but doubtlessly marking my room in the spirit world. It read, "Can you see me?" I looked at the wall, then to it, then to the wall. I nodded. Its razor maw rotated, sharp and jagged teeth spinning. "Can you hear me?" it asked. Its voice guttural, like it came from a drain pipe clogged with muck. I nodded. Of all the words to come out of its mouth, I didn't expect what it said next. "Sorry. I didn't want to scare you." Sorry? A monster made of knives and jagged pieces was apologizing for scaring me? "Can you hear me?" I asked back. "Yes." We stared at each other for an uncomfortable amount of time. "How did you know I could see you?" "Your eyes. They're like a lighthouse. When you looked at me, I thought I was in a spotlight." "Did you hurt him?" I asked bluntly. "Did you hurt Mr. Raymond's?" "Was that his name?" it asked. "Yes, I did. I'm sorry. Things are different when you cross over." "But that doesn't make it right," I'd argue. It looked at me, seeming to finally parse that I was a child, before it'd tilt its head. "You will understand in time. What's your name?" "I shouldn't talk to strangers." "I don't want to be a stranger. You're the only voice I've heard since crossing over." It paused as if trying to figure out how to communicate with a child. "Then what's your name? Strangers don't give out their names." "I don't have a name," it'd respond. I looked at him. It occurred to me in some childish capacity that not having a name was bad. I looked him over, quivering, ignoring the panic. He might look scary, but he was being too nice, too polite. Just because someone looked horrible didn't mean they couldn't be good. "Rocky," I'd say. "Your name is Rocky." "Why?" it asked, tilting its head. "Rocky's the Red Ranger. You're red, so you're Rocky." "What's the Red Ranger?" I stared at him, realizing he probably didn't know much of anything. As an adult looking back, I realized how idiotic it all was. The juvenile desire to help, ignoring my own safety because I felt I was special. Nothing bad ever happened to special people, spoke the childlike mind. In fact, you can help him, and he won't hurt other people. Evil has a choice, and maybe, just maybe, I could make him something good. "Rocky, do you want to be my friend?" I asked, oblivious in my youth to how stupid this was, only focused on how I could help him. "But you have to promise that you'll be good." "I would like that very much." Rocky would make no promise. Only that he would like that. I realize now this is all his fault. He made that thing. If you are reading this, stay out of the woods in Australia. It could still be out there. and it's smart. This all started about a month ago. I was startled awake from my couch. Knock, knock, knock. Who is all the way out here banging on my door this early? I grumbled as I approached my front door and gazed through the peephole. Sure enough, there was a middle-aged man, balding with a wrinkled forehead and not very tall. He noticed the peephole and gave me a wide smile. Well, this guy isn't creepy at all. Might as well see what he wants. I opened the door and the man greeted me. Hey there. I just moved in across the street. Just wanted to say hello. I'm Tulio. His aged expression shifted to a grin. Annoyed but not wanting to be disrespectful, I greeted him back. Nice to meet you. Name's Ned. Hiding behind him, I noticed a little girl. Come now, don't be rude. Ned is our new neighbor, Tulio said. Say hello. Hello, the girl muttered. Then more clearly this time, looked up at me and said, I'm Olivia. I smiled. My wife and I were expecting to have a little girl. Olivia's brown hair and eyes reminded me of my wife's, a beautiful shade of orange-brown like that of autumn leaves. I scratched the back of my head and greeted her as well. It's nice to meet you, Olivia. I glanced at the house across the street behind them. Nobody had lived there for years. My house is in the middle of nowhere, and the other closest house is the one right across the long road that stretches for dozens of miles out of the woods. A strange place to put two random houses, I know. But apart from the terrible phone service and internet, for me, it was perfect. If you don't mind me asking, Tulio, was it? What brings you around here? The corners of his grin shifted down slightly. Well, the city life gets kind of overwhelming, you know. I had some trouble at my old job, too. I decided to move out here before my old boss started looking to hire me back. Besides, they need some space, too. He pointed at the van parked beside the road. I know. Let me introduce you. I raised an eyebrow at Tulio. Don't worry, it's nothing strange, he said, noticing my suspicion. My curiosity piqued. I followed him and his daughter down the driveway leading to my front door and onto the pavement to the back of the van. They must have grown tired of staying in here by now, he stated as he opened the doors to the van. My eyes widened. Inside the van were all sorts of birds. Parrots, peacocks, many that I've never seen before. Tulio gave me a pat on the back and smiled. Beautiful, aren't they? These guys are my whole life. I'm an ornithologist, you see. Ah, that explains all these birds then. I'm guessing you couldn't keep all of these back where you lived, right? Tulio's dark brown eyes looked down for a bit, as if contemplating the next words. Yes, something like that. I looked back at the birds. They really were beautiful. All of them had vibrant colors, and there were species I'd never seen before. One of them, however, caught my eye. I'd read about them in a book back in middle school. It was a lyrebird. Nature's greatest mimic, I thought out loud. I see you noticed, Tulio said as he climbed into the van and took out the caged lyrebird. This one is special to me. You see, she was my wife's favorite as well. I noticed Tulio's expression change to one of melancholy. Your wife? Where is she now? She passed away not too long ago. Tulio looked down at the cage of the bird he was holding, his gentle grasp tightening ever so slightly on the wooden handle. This bird has been with us for many years. It's all I have left to remember her by, but I like to believe my wife's closer to us than you'd think. There was silence between us for a bit. I knew the feeling he had all too well. I opened my mouth to try and break the silence with some words of comfort, when the sound of a woman's soft voice stopped me. Tulio, I love you, sang the lyrebird. It was a gentle voice, even when replicated by a bird. It could give you a sense of ease. I looked down at the bird. its beady brown eyes staring back with intelligence I didn't think possible of an animal. And then I looked back at Tullio. I could see his eyes begin to dampen with tears, his surprised expression shifting to a grimace as he held them back. Feeling a bit guilty about what had just happened, I racked my brain for anything I could say. Wow, that bird's super cool. You're super lucky to have something like this. It's like a living recording of your wife, right? I stammered. Immediately, I regretted my words. That was the worst thing I could have said. In what world is he lucky? For crying out loud, I should have been able to sympathize with the guy, and this is the best I could say? But before I could apologize, Tullio flashed me a smile and wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his sweater. You're right. This little one is a blessing. It's the reason I'm able to see her again after all. In hindsight, that was a strange thing to say, but I was too busy feeling relieved he didn't take my words of comfort the wrong way to notice the grim meaning behind his previous statements. Regaining his composure, Tullio spoke. Now, me and Olivia could use some help bringing these guys inside, if you don't mind. Sure, I replied. Tullio led the way to his house with Olivia following close behind him and then opened the front door. Inside, I was surprised to find that the house was already furnished, and not so surprised to find that everything was painted in a fine layer of dust. Aside from this, the only furniture of note was a large bookshelf and a portrait depicting a white-haired woman, clutching in her hand a long, slender blade. The portrait was beautiful, and as for the bookshelf, its contents were a little odd. Books about biology and human anatomy, as well as bird anatomy. A couple, however, caught my eye. Strange books about rituals and others about alchemical sciences. I took out another book that seemed the most normal. It read, Hiding in Plain Sight, by Susan Lewis. Disinterested, I placed the book on the shelf and resigned from inspecting it further. But then something else caught my eye. A small picture frame on a table by the bookshelf. There was something familiar about it. After looking at it for a while longer, I realized it was a picture of young Tullio dressed in a white lab coat and a woman with long brown hair like that of autumn leaves. Why would he lie about just having moved here? Well, technically, he never claimed to have not lived here, but something's off, I thought. I decided to stay quiet about it and turned to face Tullio, who was admiring some of his new free furniture. Lucky me, Tullio laughed. Must be from the folks who lived here. Too lazy to move stuff out, huh? Saves me some money. Looks like it, I replied. Olivia ran up the dusty wooden stairs, yelling enthusiastically. I'm gonna look at the rooms, Dad. Okay, but be careful, Tullio yelled back. Together we made our way back to the van and began to bring all the birds inside the spacious living room of Tullio's house. But when I was picking up the cage of a large parrot, I stopped to look at something. I put down the cage and got closer to the front of the van, where I saw a large bag leaning up against the wall of the van, in the shape of a human body. A strange smell was coming from it. My heart sank, and a million thoughts raced through my mind in the span of a second, but my rushing thoughts stopped when I heard the sound of footsteps coming up to the rear of the van. Tullio's once gentle and aged voice, now sounding cold and empty, called out to me. Ned, you've been taking a while. Everything all right? That parrot should be the last one. Deciding the best course of action was to act normal, I stammered. Yeah, sorry. Just having some trouble carrying the cage. Oh, yeah, that one doesn't have a handle, huh? Sorry about that. I carried the bird past Tullio, his small and unassuming figure now looking much larger in my eyes. Inside the house I placed the cage down, and then my thoughts once again began to race. That bag could have been anything. But why was it shaped that way? Could this guy really be a murderer? What about his daughter? Does she know about this? When he comes back, what should I do? The noise in my head was forced to quiet once again as I noticed Tullio returning, and to my horror, over one of his shoulders was the large bag. Act cool. He settled the bag down near the front door. I could feel a cold sweat running down my neck, and stupid as it may have been, I spoke. Hey, just out of curiosity, what's in that bag? I pointed towards the large bag he had just set down on the floor. Good going. You just asked the now potential murderer about his painfully obvious victim. No way this could go wrong, huh? Oh, this? Tullio looked down at the bag. A pit formed in my stomach as he pulled out a pocket knife from his back pocket. I watched in silence as he sliced open the top of the bag and reached his hand inside, showing me the contents. Seeds. The bag was full of bird feed. I felt a wave of relief as my tensed body began to finally relax. Tullio put the knife back in his pocket and then approached me. He patted me on the shoulder and said, "Thanks for the help, Ned. My back has been killing me. You know, I'm gonna go ahead and get the bird situated." I let out a nervous laugh. "Yeah, sure. Anytime you need anything, just let me know." That night, as I lay in bed, I remember feeling glad that my neighbor seemed like a genuine guy, one that I had something in common with. When my wife and I lost our child, she couldn't cope with it, and one night I found her hanging from our apartment balcony. That night, seeing her cold, lifeless body swaying in the breeze, it took every ounce of will I had not to join her. I felt betrayed that she would leave me alone like this, without so much as telling me anything. After this, I became irritable and impossible to be around. Not a day went by that I didn't consider ending it all just to see her again, feel her again, listen to her again. I made plans to go through with it, but the day never came. Whether it was because I was too cowardly to end it, or courageous enough to keep living, I'll never know. So I decided that the best thing for me now was to isolate myself. I had always loved nature and hiking, especially in the woods, and that's what brought me here to the middle of nowhere. At first I thought my peace had been ruined when I woke up to that knock on my door, but now I was thinking maybe I could use the company. The next few weeks were pretty normal, but now I was spending some of that time playing with Olivia, who I had noticed was always outside with some of the birds. The birds that weren't good flyers were left outside within the confines of the very tall fence of Tullio's house, although I never saw the lyre bird among them. Spending time with Olivia was bittersweet. It made me think of what life could be like if I had my wife and daughter, but something was off. As the days went by, I saw Tullio less often. When I would see him, he had dark bags under his eyes, as if he was staying up all night doing something. The picture frame I had seen inside the house kept scratching at me. One day I couldn't put it off any longer. While playing with Olivia and the birds, I asked her, "Have you lived here before?" Olivia looked at me, raising an eyebrow, and giggled. "No, silly. We just moved here, remember?" "I know, but I was thinking maybe this was your old house or something. Or maybe your dad lived here before." Olivia put a finger to her chin and thought about it for a few seconds. "Nope, I have no idea." Then she went back to playing with the birds. I sighed and lay down on the grass. So not even Olivia knows anything. It's honestly none of my business if Tullio used to live here and didn't tell me anything, but why lie? And why come back here now? Was there something he needed here? Olivia stopped running around and looked over at me. "Oh, but you know, I never got to have my birthday party before coming here." "Oh yeah? Why not? How old are you now?" "I'm 12. But when we moved out of our old house, Dad said that seeing Mom again was more important or something. He also said, We didn't have much time because the funny men from his job were looking for him, but I think he's just kinda crazy 'cause he's getting old. She laughed. Hey, that's your dad. Show some consideration. He must have been really good at his job if his previous workplace is still trying to hire him back, huh? And you know what? How about we celebrate your birthday soon? Just let your dad know, and I'll get everything ready. I said as I brushed the grass off my clothes and headed home. Really? Okay. It's a promise then. Olivia beamed as she waved goodbye. Walking home, I thought about what she said. Tullio said they were going to see his wife again. He must be going through it still. And if that is his old house, then it must be bringing back bad memories. Maybe having this party will cheer him up a bit. But the party would never come. That night I leaped out of bed to the sound of frantic banging on my door downstairs. I grabbed the bats I kept beside my bed and ran downstairs. As I got closer to the door, I recognized the screaming from the other side as Olivia's voice. I dropped the bat and opened the door. She had tears running down her cheeks. My dad needs help. He's really hurt. She sobbed. What happened? She struggled to speak through her sobbing and gasping breaths. He went into the room he always tells me I'm not allowed to go in, but he hasn't come out, and he was asking me for help. I told her to show me, and we ran across the street to Tullio's house. As I got closer to the front door, I immediately noticed that none of the birds were making any sound. At the door to the living room, I noticed that the same bag of bird feed Tullio had cut open was gone. Although not seemingly important, this bothered me. Then I heard Tullio's unseen voice pleading for help. Please, help me, he screamed. He's over here. Olivia yelled at me as she led me through the house to a basement door behind the stairs of the second floor. Help me, open the door, please. Tullio pleaded from beyond the door, and I had never heard such desperation in another man's voice before. Then I heard loud creaks come rushing close to the door, and Tullio's voice grew even more frantic. Quick, open the... His voice was cut short, followed by loud wooden creaks and thumping sounds, this time moving quickly away. Tullio? I called out. He must have fallen down the basement stairs, I thought to myself. I reached out and grabbed the door handle. It was locked. There's no time for this. Tullio could be hurt. I slammed my body against the door repeatedly, and then with a final heave, I saw my world turn black as I crashed down a long set of stairs into an inky dark basement. Ned, are you okay? Olivia yelled down at me. I got up groggily onto my unsteady feet and yelled back. I'm fine. You stay up there. I looked up at Olivia, and the faint light that did little to illuminate the pitch-dark basement around me. However, I noticed that the stairs were splattered with blood. I felt a warm liquid run from my head and down to my cheek. I pressed my hand against it, and sure enough, it was blood. But it wasn't mine. Tullio must have gotten hurt. Tullio, where are you? Are you okay? I yelled into the darkness. No response. I decided to follow the trail of blood. How did he fall so far from the bottom of the stairs? The basement was large. It wasn't a trick of the darkness. It must have been an extremely wide room. The weirdest part was the strange, extremely intricate circles scattered on the walls, with markings and writings I couldn't recognize or read. The pungent smell of rot grew stronger the further I walked into the basement. Then I neared the end of the trail, where I heard a strange noise, wet popping and snapping. I could barely make out the figure of Tullio on the ground in a pool of blood, and some sort of massive, fuzzy spider tearing away at him. But it wasn't a spider. The thing's feathers slowly retreated, revealing those familiar, intelligent eyes staring back at me. Even in the darkness, they were unmistakable, except this time they were much larger. I barely had time to process the thing's appearance before it started to scream. I don't think scream is the right word for it, though. The only way I can describe it is that it sounded like a large number of people, men, women, children, screaming simultaneously in a dreadful orchestra of collective agony, so loud that I could feel my very bones vibrate. I covered my ears as hard as I could with my hands, my fear quickly transforming into terror. I ran back to the door faster than I had ever run. I could only have been running for a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The walls of the basement amplified the sound, making it feel as though it was coming from all around me. My vision began to blur, and the pain in my ears was unbearable. I thought my head might explode. Somehow, in my disoriented state, I reached the stairs, but to my horror, I couldn't climb them. Every step I took sent me crashing down face first into the cold wooden steps, as the screams robbed me of my balance. My mind's pleas to my body to stand and walk fell on deaf ears. I felt the unholy cacophony of voices grow closer. This was it. I reached out toward the light above and felt an arm grab me. Olivia was pulling me up, yelling something that I couldn't make out through the noise. I had to act quickly. My senses in disarray, I used all my might to perform the menial yet grand task of crawling up the stairs. I shut the door just in time and locked it firmly in place by resting my back on it. And then silence. Olivia and I stared at each other in horror for a moment, but the silence was soon broken by slamming on the door. "Run!" I screamed at Olivia, and we bolted for the front door and out of the house to the yard. It was at this point I heard the basement door give way with a loud crash, and the birds began going crazy in response to the thing's presence. I didn't hear the sound of its pursuit. I didn't know if it had even given chase, but I dared not turn around. Olivia and I were halfway across the road to my house when we heard the gentle voice of a woman. "Olivia, wait, it's me." Olivia stopped running, and I turned back to yell at her not to stop, but it was too late. What followed is something that will be burned into my eyes for the rest of my life. The thing loomed over Olivia. It looked like a person, but it was wrong. Its long brown hair, like that of autumn leaves, covered parts of its face, with patches of feathers across its sickly frame. Its elegant tail contrasted with the rest of its repulsive appearance, and those eyes, those same eyes of unspoken intelligence, gazed down at Olivia, the eyes of a predator. Olivia opened her mouth slowly. "Mommy?" Then in the blink of an eye, the thing leaped at Olivia, its jaw unhinging into a wide, terrible maw, bearing long black talons down at her. I ran, not wanting to see what followed. I heard the sound of flesh tearing and bones snapping through Olivia's muffled screaming. I reached my house and barricaded the door as quickly as I could, gasping for air. What is happening? I have to be going crazy. This can't be real. I cried and my stomach rejected its contents as I threw up all over my living room floor. I couldn't just stay like this. I needed help quickly. I ran up the stairs to my room and grabbed my phone from my nightstand. I called 000 and told the operator there had been a murder. "I'm sending help your way, sir. It seems you live in a rural area, so they may take some time. Please be patient and lock your..." The call cut out. "Hello? Great. Terrible service just when I needed it. At least I know help is on the way." I curled up against the wall with the shotgun I kept under my bed, praying to every god I knew that I wouldn't have to use it, that I wouldn't have to come face to face with that thing again. I tried my hardest not to think about the situation. I felt like I was losing my mind. I waited for what couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. And then I heard them. Police sirens. A wave of relief washed over me. They got here quickly. I'm at least an hour away from the nearest town, I thought. But I didn't care. I was safe. I rushed down the stairs and began to hear the chatter of radios and cars pulling up to my driveway. Then a sound knocking at the door. "Hello, sir? We got your call. Is everything okay?" "Yes, hello, thank you. God, I need help. My neighbor's been murdered." I yelled at the officer through the barricade. "Stay calm, sir. We're here now. You're safe. Just open this door so you can explain what happened." "Yeah, okay, give me a second." I walked closer to the barricaded door to unblock it, but a sudden realization stopped me. Where were the emergency lights? There was no light coming through the gap under the door, and the police had arrived far too quickly. Something was wrong. My stomach began to sink and unease crept in once again. I slowly stepped away from the door. "Hello, sir? You need to open this door so we can help you." What am I doing? Am I going crazy? Help is on the other side of this door, so why won't I open it? I just need to open this door and it'll all be over. And yet, I found myself stepping farther and farther away from the door, away from the logical path to safety, like some sort of primal fear was moving me on its own. "Sir, open this door right now," the police demanded. Frustration welling up inside me, I yelled, "I'm not opening the door." And then it all stopped. The police chatter, the hum of the car engines, and the voices outside. All of it, all at once, my world became quiet. I stood still, listening. The silence was unbearable. I had to do something, but I didn't know what. "Ned?" I jumped. Olivia's voice beckoned me from beyond the door. "Ned, are you okay? Please come outside. I need help." I felt my chest tighten, and my breath grew short. I needed to get away from that door. I stepped backward quietly, carefully, as the thing rambled on, posing as Olivia. But I wasn't careful enough. The floorboards creaked beneath me, alerting the thing that its prey had caught on, and the path of least resistance was no longer an option. I heard the thing groan and whine as it frustrated, and then it began to slam on the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The makeshift barricade held firm, but by now I was already upstairs clutching the shotgun close and hiding in my closet. It's been an hour since then. I don't know where the cops are, or if they're even coming. Every sound I hear feels like a trick. A lie. Maybe the call was a lie too. A lie, huh? I bet everything Tulio told me was a lie too. About his city life. About just moving here. Maybe even about his old job. Some neighbor he was. I still hear it pounding on the front door. Yet, moments ago, I heard a door on the 2nd floor creak open. I don't know how it's doing that. I don't know what to believe. I can't trust my ears. It's going to find me, but I'm going to fight back. I'm going to try and kill it. If you hear from me again, it means I was successful. This was the only place I could think to write this, and if I fail, if God forbid you encounter this thing, please don't fall for it. Jack sat slouched in the chair across from me, his shoulders hunched, eyes constantly flicking toward the camera mounted in the corner. His fingers, pale and trembling, kept tugging at the frayed cuffs of his prison jumpsuit. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, worn down by something much deeper than exhaustion. It was fear and something else. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm and controlled. You said it started with a crack? Jack nodded slowly, barely meeting my gaze. Yeah, he mumbled. Just a crack in the wall. That's how it all began. He paused, running a hand through his hair, and for a moment I thought he wasn't going to say anything else. Then he took a shaky breath, his eyes distant, like he was trying to relive those first few days in his mind. Solitary's always been a mess, he continued, voice hoarse. The walls in there, cracked, dirty, you get used to it. It's like the whole place is rotting from the inside out. You stop noticing after a while. Mold in the corners, cracks everywhere. Normal stuff for a place like that. His fingers drummed absently on the table, the sound sharp in the otherwise quiet room. I noticed the crack in my cell a few days before everything started. It was small, maybe 3 or 4 inches, right down by the corner where the wall meets the floor. Nothing unusual, right? These walls were falling apart all over the place, so I didn't pay much attention at first. He looked up, his brow furrowed as if trying to decide how to explain what happened next. But the next day, it wasn't just a crack anymore. There was something growing out of it. Black stuff. I thought it was mold. That's what you'd think, right? This place isn't exactly sanitary. Jack took a deep breath, his fingers tapping faster now, more erratic. It didn't move, at least not that I could see, but every time I looked at it, it seemed like there was more of it. I swear to God, it was spreading. Slow, maybe 6 inches a day. I couldn't see it move, but when I'd wake up in the morning, it had crept further along the wall, like it was crawling while I was sleeping. I wrote down the details and looked back up. You were saying it was growing that fast? Just overnight? Jack nodded, his voice growing more agitated. Yeah, I'd wake up and there'd be more of it. Not much at first, just a few more inches, but I could tell it was moving. The crack was getting wider too, and it wasn't just mold. I knew it wasn't mold. Not the way it looked. It wasn't just sitting there on the surface. It was alive. His voice grew quieter, as though he wasn't sure if he should be saying the words out loud. It was like it was breathing. I raised my eyebrow but kept my expression neutral. What made you think that? Jack shifted in his seat, eyes darting towards the walls of the room before fixing on the table. It wasn't just that it was spreading. It was how it made the room feel different, like the air was heavier. It smelled wrong, too, not like the usual mold or dampness. This was something else. It smelled like something rotting, foul, the kind of smell that makes you gag. He paused, rubbing his fingers against his temples, trying to recall every detail. I told the guards the second day, right when I noticed it had spread. The guy dropping off food just shrugged it off. Said he'd file a report, but I knew he wouldn't. Why would he? It's solitary. They don't care what happens in there as long as we stay quiet. Jack's fingers clenched into fists, knuckles turning white. So I waited. Figured maybe someone would check it out, but no one came, and each morning when I woke up, the black stuff had spread a little more. Not fast enough to notice while it was happening, but enough that I knew it was growing. His voice lowered, his eyes widening slightly as he recounted those days. By the 3rd day, it had covered the entire corner of the wall. The crack had gotten bigger, and the black stuff, it wasn't just growing anymore. It was feeding. It had to be. There was no other explanation for how it was spreading so steadily. Every morning it was a few inches closer, and the smell kept getting worse. He ran his hands through his hair again, his face etched with frustration and fear. I kept telling the guards. Every time they walked by, I'd bang on the door and shout that something was wrong. They thought I was losing it and told me to shut up and deal with it. But I wasn't crazy. That stuff was real and it was spreading. Jack took a deep breath, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. I wasn't imagining it. I know what I saw. The room felt heavier, his words sinking in like stones. He paused, waiting for a response, but I let the silence stretch, giving him time to collect himself. Finally, I asked, "What happened after the third day? Did it stop?" Jack shook his head, his voice wavering. "No, it didn't stop. It just kept growing, slow but steady." Jack took another shaky breath, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. He looked around the room again like he was searching for something that wasn't there, then rubbed his face with both hands. I could tell he was trying to push back the memories, but they kept clawing their way to the surface. "It kept spreading," he muttered, his voice strained. "Every morning, I'd wake up and that black stuff was a little closer. 6 inches, maybe more. Every day. The crack, too, it was getting bigger, like something was trying to push its way out from behind the wall." He stopped, staring at the ceiling for a moment, then shook his head. "I couldn't take it anymore. I started banging on the door, yelling at the guards every time they passed. I told them the black stuff was spreading and that the crack was getting worse. They didn't believe me. They just looked at me like I was crazy." His hands clenched into fists. I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw, but to them, I was just another inmate trying to get out of solitary. They told me to calm down and someone would come check it out, but no one ever did. Not for days. Jack's voice dropped lower. By the 4th day, I could barely breathe in there. The smell, it was like something had died in the walls. Worse than that, it was foul, like the whole room was rotting from the inside out. He stared down at his hands, and I could feel it. In my bones, you know? Like something was wrong with the air itself. It felt thick and heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I couldn't sleep anymore. I'd lie awake at night staring at that black stuff creeping along the wall, knowing it was getting closer. Jack paused, shaking his head again like he was trying to clear the memory. I begged them. Every time a guard walked by, I begged them to move, to get me out of that cell. They ignored me. Days passed. The black stuff kept growing. I could feel it getting closer, but they didn't care. He let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow. It wasn't until the lawsuit threats started flying that they decided to move me. They couldn't risk me going to a lawyer, saying they were keeping me in a contaminated cell. So they moved me. I watched him carefully. "Where did they take you?" "To another cell in solitary," Jack muttered. "A dirtier one, if you can believe that. No black stuff, though. But I could still see my old cell from the window in my door, just a few doors down. I'd look at it every day, but I couldn't see the fungus. Not yet." His voice dropped, barely a whisper now. I wasn't the only one in solitary anymore. They put someone else in my old cell. Jack stared at the table, his face tight with anxiety. At first, I didn't hear much about him. The guards didn't talk to me after I moved out. But after a few days, I started to overhear things. Little bits and pieces. They said the guy they put in my old cell, he touched the black stuff. They had to move him to the med wing. He stopped, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm them. I didn't know what happened to him at first, just that he was unconscious, and they didn't think he'd wake up. Then the rumor started. Jack's eyes darkened, his voice lowering. They said his skin was changing. One of the guards said it looked like it was blistering, like something was eating him from the inside out. Another said his veins were turning black, like the stuff was crawling under his skin. I scribbled down notes, glancing up at Jack. How long after they moved you did this happen? He shrugged, his voice distant. A couple of days, maybe. Not long. Whatever was in that cell, it got him fast. Jack's hand shook slightly as he continued. I started hearing more after that. The guards didn't want to talk about it, but I could tell they were scared. They were trying to keep it quiet, but everyone knew something was wrong. The guy they put in my old cell, he wasn't just sick. He was changing. Jack shifted in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly as if the memory of what came next still gnawed at him. It wasn't long after that when things started changing. I could feel it. Something was happening in that place. The guards, they stopped talking, just did their rounds without saying a word. No more gossip, no more jokes. Nothing. He paused, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. The guy in the med wing? They said he wasn't getting better. They'd quarantined him and locked the whole wing down. That's when they started wearing those suits. You know, the ones they wear when there's a biohazard. Full suits, gloves, masks. I couldn't even see their faces anymore. Jack's voice grew more agitated. When they came to drop off my meals, they wouldn't look at me. Just shoved the tray through the slot and walked away. I tried asking them what was going on, but they didn't answer. They didn't say a thing. It was like I didn't exist anymore. I watched him carefully, jotting down notes as he spoke. Did you see anything unusual from your cell this time? Jack nodded slowly, his eyes flicking up toward the small window in the door. Yeah, I started watching my old cell more closely. I couldn't see the black stuff at first, not from where I was, but after a few days I saw it. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. The fungus. It was spreading, creeping along the walls of my old cell. I could see it through the window. It had covered almost the whole corner by then. And the crack, it was bigger, a lot bigger. I couldn't see it move, but every day it was a little further along, a little darker, like it was eating away at the walls. Jack swallowed hard, rubbing his hands together again. And the smell, even from where I was, I could smell it, like rot, like something festering. It made my stomach turn every time I caught a whiff of it. He shook his head slowly, his voice growing more desperate. I kept banging on the door, shouting at the guards, asking what was going on. They wouldn't tell me anything, just dropped off the meals and left. No one spoke to me anymore. It was like the whole place had gone silent. Jack's eyes met mine, wide with fear. That's when I knew. Whatever was happening in that prison, it wasn't just some sickness. It was something else, something worse. Jack's voice wavered as he continued, the fear evident in every word. A couple more days passed, and that's when the real stuff hit the fan. They stopped delivering meals on time. One day, nothing. No food, no guards, just silence, and I knew something had happened. I could feel it in the air. He rubbed his arms as if trying to shake off a chill. I kept looking out my window trying to see anything, but the hall was empty. No one came by, no sounds, nothing. It was like I'd been forgotten. Jack paused, his voice trembling slightly. And then I heard the screaming. His eyes grew wide as he relived the moment. It wasn't loud. Solitary's far enough from the main wings that you don't hear much, but I heard it. Faint, like it was coming from down the hall near the med wing. Someone was shouting, panicked like they were fighting something. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't good. Jack's breath hitched. and he gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. That's when I saw them. The guards, they were running. I've never seen them run before. Not like that. They were trying to get out of the med wing, but something was wrong. One of them looked terrified, and I could hear them shouting at each other. Then, silence. He stared at the table, eyes wide and unblinking. That's when I heard the footsteps. Jack's breath quickened as he continued. They were heavy, dragging, like something was limping down the hall. I rushed to the window trying to see what it was, but the hall was empty. The sound grew louder and closer, and I swear it was coming from the direction of the med wing. Whatever was making those footsteps, it wasn't walking like a person. He paused, his fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I heard the guards again. They were shouting something about getting the doors open. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew they were scared. And that scared me. Jack looked up at me, his eyes wide with fear. I saw one of them, a guard running down the hall. He was heading toward my cell, fumbling with the keys, trying to unlock the door. He kept looking back like something was chasing him. He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. I didn't see it at first, but I heard it. This wet, squelching sound like something was dragging across the floor, and then I saw it. The thing they'd put in the med wing. It wasn't human anymore. It was changed. Jack's hands shook as he spoke, and I could see the fear in his eyes, the memory of that moment burning like a fresh wound. I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at it. The thing, it wasn't human anymore. I don't even know if it remembered being human. His voice cracked, his breath uneven. It was big, taller than I remembered, the person being like it had been stretched somehow. Its skin, if you could even call it that anymore, was swollen, bulging in places like it was filled with something. The black fungus had grown over most of its body, but it wasn't just on the surface. You could see it moving underneath. Crawling through its veins, thick and dark, its skin was splitting in places, oozing this thick, black liquid. Parts of it looked like they were rotting, but it was still alive. Jack leaned forward, his voice dropping as he described the creature in horrifying detail. The worst part was its face. The fungus had taken over most of it, but I could still see parts of what used to be a man. His mouth was hanging open, slack like it had forgotten how to close. His eyes, God, his eyes, they were completely black, not just the pupils, but the whole thing, like they'd been swallowed by the darkness inside him. Jack's hands gripped the table, his knuckles white. It wasn't just the way it looked. It moved wrong, too, like its bones had been broken and put back together in the wrong order. Its arms were too long, its legs bent in ways that didn't make sense. It didn't walk so much as lurch, dragging one foot behind the other. Every step it took made this wet, squelching sound, like the fungus was eating away at it from the inside out. He paused, staring at the floor, his voice growing weaker. It smelled, too, like rot, like meat left out too long. The air around it was thick with the stench, and I could barely breathe. I don't know how the guard could stand being that close. Jack swallowed hard, eyes wide. He almost had the door open. I was right there watching through the window, and I could see him fumbling with the keys, trying to get the lock undone. His hands were shaking so bad, I thought he'd dropped the keys. His voice trembled as he continued. He was muttering to himself, saying something about needing to get me out. I don't even think he saw the thing coming for him until it was too late. Jack squeezed his eyes shut as if trying to block out the memory. The door clicked open. He finally got it. I thought for a second I was going to make it, but that thing, it was right behind him. It grabbed him before he even had a chance to run. Jack's voice faltered, barely above a whisper. I've never seen anything like it. The way it grabbed him, like it didn't even care. It just tore into him. His hands, if you can even call them that, they were twisted claws, black and dripping with whatever the fungus had turned it into. It sank them into his chest like they were cutting through butter. He shook his head, eyes distant. He didn't scream, not even once. 1 second he was there, and the next, he wasn't. Just blood everywhere. The thing was ripping him apart, tearing chunks out of him like it was feeding, and I just stood there watching, too scared to move. Jack took a deep breath, his voice still shaking. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like forever. But after it was done, it didn't even look at me. It just turned and started dragging his body down the hall, like it didn't have any purpose, like it was just following some mindless act. His hands were still trembling. Jack lifted his head slightly and his voice was growing faint. And then it left. Jack's breathing was shaky as he continued, his hands still trembling slightly from the memory. I thought it was over. I thought once it killed the guard, I'd be next. But it didn't even look at me. It just dragged the body down the hall. His voice wavered, growing more desperate as he relived the moment. The fungus, it had spread. I hadn't noticed it before, not like that. I could see it now, seeping out from under the door of my old cell, black tendrils creeping into the hallway. It had gotten bigger. Much bigger. Thick, dark strands covered the walls near the cell, growing into the cracks, spreading further and faster than I'd ever seen. Jack swallowed hard, his voice shaking. The thing, it grabbed the guard's body right up to the spot where the fungus was leaking out into the hall. I thought maybe it was going to leave him there, but no, it did something worse. He looked down at the table as if ashamed of what he'd seen. It shoved the guard's body into the fungus, just pushed him right into it like the wall wasn't even there anymore. The black stuff, those tendrils, they wrapped around him, pulling him deeper like it was absorbing him. Jack's voice grew quieter, his fear palpable. I could see it. The fungus spread over the guard's body, crawling over his skin and covering him like a web. His face, what was left of it, disappeared into the black mass, and then the wall seemed to eat him. I pulled him in until all I could see was this black mound stuck to the wall like it was holding him there. He stared at the floor, eyes wide. It was like the fungus had claimed him, like it was feeding off of him. The more it wrapped around him, the bigger it got, spreading faster now, reaching further along the hallway. Jack paused, his breath catching in his throat. And then the thing that killed him, it started eating. His voice faltered, his eyes wide with terror. It crouched down right by the spot where the fungus was growing the thickest, and then it started tearing chunks off of it, big, wet chunks of black mold, and shoving it into its mouth. It was like it was starving for it, like it needed the fungus to survive. Jack's body shook, his hands clenching into fists. I couldn't watch. It was eating the fungus like it was meat, like it was devouring something, and the more it ate, the more the fungus seemed to spread. I could see the walls pulsing, like they were alive, like the whole place was breathing. He looked up at me, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was still the prisoner or something else entirely, but whatever it wasn't human anymore. It was part of the fungus, part of whatever was growing inside the walls. Jack's breath hitched, his eyes wide. I was too scared to move. I just watched as it fed. Jack's voice was quieter now, but there was a tension in every word. I don't know how long I stood there, watching it eat. I was too scared to move, too scared to breathe. I thought if I made a sound, it would turn around and I'd be next. He swallowed hard, staring at the table as if seeing that moment again. But eventually, it stopped. The thing just stood up slow, like it had all the time in the world. I thought for sure it would notice me then, but it didn't. It just turned, shuffling down the hall back toward the medwing. The fungus was still spreading behind it, creeping further down the walls. Jack took a shaky breath, his hands clenching and unclenching as he continued. That was my chance. The door was unlocked. I didn't want to go out there, but I knew I couldn't stay in the cell. Not with that thing out there. Not with the fungus spreading. He paused, his eyes wide, still rattled by the memory. So I opened the door. As quietly as I could, I slipped out into the hallway. The place smelled worse than ever, like the air itself was rotting. The walls, they were breathing, pulsing with the black fungus. It had spread further since the last time I looked, covering the doors, the cracks, creeping along the floor. His voice wavered, fear threading through his words. I didn't know where to go. The hall was empty. No guards, no prisoners. Just me. I thought about heading back to the main wings, but I didn't know if anyone else was still alive. I didn't know if the fungus had spread to the rest of the prison. Jack rubbed his temples, trying to push back the panic that still clung to his voice. The sound? I couldn't get it out of my head. The walls were making this wet, squelching noise. Every time the fungus pulsed, it sounded like something living was inside the walls, moving with it, like the prison itself was infected. He looked up at me, eyes wide with fear. I kept moving, but it was slow. I was terrified of making too much noise. I didn't know if that thing was still out there, and I wasn't going to take any chances. I stuck close to the walls, avoiding the patches of black mold that were creeping up from the cracks in the floor. The whole place felt wrong. It felt alive. His hands trembled as he spoke, the fear in his voice growing. I made my way through the hallway, past the other cells. Some of them were still locked. I could hear things inside, but I didn't stop to listen. I couldn't afford to. I just kept going, trying to get as far away from that thing as I could. Jack swallowed hard. I don't know how long I walked before I reached the door to the main wing. I thought maybe I'd find someone, another guard maybe, but the door, it was locked. No way out. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes darting to the camera in the corner of the room. I was trapped. He rubbed his hands over his face, his voice trembling. That's when I heard it. The creature, the thing that killed the guard, it was coming back. I could hear its footsteps, that slow, wet shuffle dragging something along the floor. I knew it was coming for me this time. His hands clenched the edge of the table. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I looked around trying to find somewhere to hide, but there was nothing. The fungus was everywhere, crawling along the floor, the walls. I could hear it pulsing. I thought I could feel it inside my head, breathing like a second heartbeat. Jack swallowed hard. his voice dropping to a whisper. And then I saw it. An air vent just above the door. It was small, barely big enough for me to squeeze through, but it was my only option. I climbed up using the edge of the door for leverage and pulled the grate off the vent. It wasn't quiet, but the creature, it didn't seem to care. It just kept coming. He took a shaky breath. I shoved myself inside the vent, trying not to make too much noise. I could hear it below me, dragging itself closer. I could feel the heat from its body, the smell of rot filling the air. I didn't dare look down. I just kept crawling, inch by inch, through that narrow space, praying it wouldn't hear me. Jack rubbed his hands together, the tension clear in his body. I don't know how long I crawled through those vents. It felt like forever. I could hear the fungus growing inside the walls like it was alive, spreading through the ducts. But eventually I found another opening. He looked up, his eyes wide. I didn't know where I was anymore. The prison was like a maze, but I knew I had to get out. I climbed out of the vent and dropped down into another hallway. This one was quieter and cleaner. I could hear voices in the distance. Someone was talking. It wasn't a guard. It sounded official. Jack's fingers trembled slightly. That's when I saw them. Federal agents. They were wearing protective suits, walking through the hallway and talking into radios. I tried to call out to them, but my voice was barely a whisper. I was weak, starving, and my body felt like it was shutting down. He rubbed his face, his voice quieter now. One of them saw me. They turned and pointed, and the others came running. They grabbed me, lifted me up, and I blacked out after that. When I woke up, I was here. The room was quiet for a moment as Jack finished his story. He stared down at his hands, pale and trembling, the words hanging in the air like a fog. I watched him carefully, my mind turning over the details of what he'd said. The transformed prisoner, the fungus, the guards. It all lined up with the reports, but something felt off. I glanced at my notes, then back at Jack. You said the fungus was in the walls, that it was everywhere. Do you think it spread beyond the prison? Jack hesitated, his fingers twitching slightly. I don't know. It was moving fast. If it's still there, it's probably spread even further by now. I tapped my pen against the table, considering my next question. What about you? Did you come into contact with the fungus? Jack's eyes flickered toward the camera in the corner of the room, his expression tightening. No, he said quickly. I stayed away from it. I made sure. I watched him closely, noting the tension in his voice. You are sure? No spores? No mold on your skin? Jack's hands clenched into fists, his voice dropping. I said I didn't touch it. But something was wrong. I could see it now in the way he moved, the way his skin looked under the harsh fluorescent light. There were small, barely noticeable black spots on his hands, like tiny cracks forming just beneath the surface. His fingernails were chipped and discolored, and there was a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. I leaned forward slightly. Jack, are you feeling all right? He didn't answer at first. He stared down at his hands, his breath growing shallow. His fingers twitched again, and then I saw it. Just the slightest movement. The skin on his knuckles shifted, bulging for a moment, like something was crawling underneath. Jack's eyes widened, his breath quickening. No, this isn't happening. I didn't touch it. But the evidence was clear now. His skin was changing, dark veins spreading slowly under the surface. The fungus had gotten to him. I could see the horror in his eyes as the realization hit him. He backed away from the table, his voice trembling. "You've got to help me. I can feel it under my skin. It's spreading." I stood up, reaching for the door, but Jack grabbed my arm. His grip weak but desperate. "Please don't let it take me. Don't let me turn into one of them." I pulled away, calling for the other agents. The door swung open and they rushed in, their eyes wide as they saw the black veins creeping up Jack's arms. He collapsed to the floor, shaking, his breath ragged. "It's too late," he whispered. "It's already inside me." And then the agents restrained him. I saw the first crack in his skin. The black tendrils were already spreading. After Jack was restrained and taken away, I sat there in silence, my mind racing. His story was almost too terrifying to believe, but the black veins spreading under his skin told me that something far worse than we could have imagined had happened in that prison. The medical team rushed Jack out of the room and I made my way to the surveillance office. The tapes from the prison's security cameras had been pulled, but I knew where I needed to start. The med bay. Jack had mentioned the prisoner who had been quarantined there, the one who had touched the fungus. If I was going to understand what we were dealing with, I needed to see what happened to him. I sat down in front of the monitor and loaded the med bay footage. The timestamp matched the days Jack had been talking about, right around the time they had moved him to a new cell and put the infected prisoner in the old one. The screen flickered to life, showing the sterile, dimly lit interior of the med bay. At first, the footage seemed ordinary. The prisoner lay on the bed, motionless, connected to machines that were monitoring his vitals. 2 guards stood nearby, occasionally glancing at him but not paying much attention. It all looked normal until the prisoner's body twitched. I leaned forward, watching closely. The prisoner shifted again, his arms jerking slightly, his head rolling to one side. At first it looked like he was waking up, but something was wrong. His movements were erratic and unnatural. The guards noticed it too. They stepped closer to the bed, exchanging nervous glances. And then it began. The prisoner's body convulsed. His back arching off the bed as if something was inside him was forcing its way out. His skin started to blister, bulging in grotesque patterns, as if something was crawling underneath. The guards rushed toward him, shouting for help, but it was too late. I watched in horror as the black veins spread beneath the prisoner's skin, creeping up from his hands, his arms, his neck, everywhere. His face twisted in pain, his mouth opening in a silent scream, but no sound came out. His eyes turned black, completely black, as if the darkness inside him had consumed everything. The guards panicked. One of them backed away while the other tried to restrain the prisoner. But the prisoner was no longer human. His body was contorted, his arms bending at impossible angles, his skin cracking open to reveal the black fungal growth underneath. It spread across his body like wildfire, taking over every inch of him. Then, with a terrifying burst of strength, the prisoner snapped free from his restraints and lunged at the guard closest to him. The camera shook as the scene descended into chaos. The other guard screamed, backing into the corner, as the prisoner, now a monstrous creature, ripped into his colleague, tearing him apart with inhuman strength. I paused the footage, my heart pounding. The image on the screen was frozen. The creature, mid-attack, its black eyes staring soullessly into the distance as it tore into the guard's chest. The room was a bloodbath, and the transformation was complete. Whatever that thing was, it was no longer the man they had brought into the med bay. I hit play again, watching as the creature dragged the lifeless guard's body across the room, tossing it aside like a rag doll. The other guard tried to escape, fumbling with the door, but the creature was faster. It leaped at him, bringing him down in an instant. Blood splattered across the camera lens, obscuring the footage for a moment, and then silence. The creature stood over the bodies, breathing heavily, its chest rising and falling in sharp, unnatural movements. Black fungus covered its skin, growing thicker and darker with each passing second. It lingered there, almost motionless, and then turned slowly toward the camera. I froze. Its black, hollow eyes were locked directly on the lens as if it knew I was watching. I shut off the footage, leaning back in my chair, my breath ragged. Whatever had happened in that prison, it had started here, in the med bay, and now it was spreading.